Today's podcast is sponsored by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, the only conservative alternative to that other group. Join amac.us/Carter today. Today, I'm going to be joined by Virginia Krieger. I met her several years ago when I was working on a series of stories regarding fentanyl deaths in the United States and families who lost loved ones to what I believe and many people now are saying is the poisoning of our U.S. citizens with counterfeit pills on our streets. Virginia Krieger lost her daughter. And since losing her beautiful daughter, Tiffany, she has been an advocate and has been fighting this fentanyl crisis in America. And she's going to talk to me about what needs to be done to protect our families and our communities. For all you mothers, fathers out there, brothers, sisters, moms, and dads, you cannot miss this episode. I am telling you right now, I know it's a scary thing, but I want to give you the tools, and Virginia Krieger wants to give you the tools that you are going to need to fight for your family, so that you do not become a victim. That is the most important thing. We're going to give you the tools so that you can fight back and join our army. We are an army of moms and dads, brothers and sisters, friends and families, churches and church leaders, and people in America who are learning the truth, are standing up for it, and standing up to the dangers that are posed by these counterfeit pills on our streets that I believe is irregular warfare against our citizens, and we need to fight back. This is the show that will show you how to do that. And it will teach you what you need to be mindful of, what you need to watch out for so that you can protect your family. Hey, everyone, don't forget, please follow and subscribe. I want you to get all of my links at saracarter.com. That is saracarter.com. And guess what? I want you to go to Rumble. and we're going to start posting all of the Sara Carter Show there. It's the Sara Carter Show. You can follow me on Rumble, okay? It's really important because I'm going to start doing Rumble locals. I mean, I know we've got a lot going on, but we've got to make the time to reach the right people and be on the right platforms. And Rumble is a platform that everybody can be on because guess what? It protects our First Amendment rights of free speech. You go to saracarter.com. You're going to get all the links to my Twitter, my Facebook, my Instagram, everything else. And while you're there, sign up for my email list. This way, you and I will not get shadow banned. Before I get to Virginia Krieger and before I get to a very, very important story, and it is the low recruitment rate of our military. And by the way, increased rates of suicide in the military, low recruitment rate to get people to join our all volunteer force. It's just tragic. I believe that President Biden and the Biden administration, as well as the policies, I believe, that have been implemented in the military are leading to this because people don't feel like they get the support that they need. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Border Patrol and how there's an increased suicide rate there as well. But before we get there, I want to talk to you about a product and a company that actually cares about America and puts you first. Puts America first. You know what I'm going to say? Mike Lindell with My Pillow, my store. He's got products that you can't even imagine. All made here in the United States. If you go to mystore.com and My Pillow right now, they are having a huge sale on the Percal bed sheets. I've talked about this with you before. Everybody in my family, my husband loves the Percal bed sheets. He loves all of Mike Lindell's products. He says they're great. And he laughs when he hears the podcast. He's an avid listener of the Sara Carter Show. Yeah, he hasn't had enough of me yet. And he's always laughing because he says, you brag so much about these sheets and about all of the stuff that we have in our house. And it's great. He goes, because it's so personal. And I hope people realize that you really mean it. I do. I really mean it. I have them in our guest rooms. I have them in all of the rooms in the house. I send them to my college aged children as well. And I make sure that they are gifts that we give every single year. I've got the dog beds. I've got the My Slippers. I've got the My Pillows. And right now, if you go to mypillow.com/Carter or call 1-800-685-7221, you will get deep discounts on the My Pillow Per Cal bed sheets. Listen to this: queen size regular, $89.98, now on sale for $39.98. You cannot beat that. And while you're there, take advantage of the buy one, get one free sale on My Pillows, towels, and so much more. Visit mypillow.com/Carter or call 1-800-685-7221 today for the sale of the year on My Pillow Per Cal bed sheets. mypillow.com/Carter or call 1-800-685-7221. You're going to love it. Okay, so where do we start? Before we get to Virginia Krieger, because that's such a heavy story. I mean, I have another one that I'm going to talk to you about, which is how the U.S. Army is really falling short of its recruitment rates by 25%. Its recruiting goal. You know, my husband, it was really interesting. He used to say, and I know you're going to listen to this, babe, and you're going to say, yeah, you're right. I mean, he used to say that he would be a little upset. Like if people would say the greatest generation was like the 1940s, right? You know, the men and women that were in, you know, during World War II, they of course were great. My father was part of that great generation, but so are the young men and women that are part of all of our volunteer force now. The ones that joined after September 11th, the sons and daughters of Americans who would go overseas and had volunteered to defend our nation in countries far away like Afghanistan and Iraq and other parts of the world, where some of them lost their lives, many of them in Afghanistan alone, over 7,000, tens of thousands wounded. They gave everything, some of them. Some of them were our friends. That is a great generation. And that is something that should be respected when you think about it. The men and women who join the U.S. military do so voluntarily. And they are but a small fraction of our nation, very small, like 1%, right? That go overseas at any one given time, or like that are part of this military, expansive military. And it's a very small amount. But right now, the U.S. military is not ready and capable, right? Because they're falling short of recruiting goals. And this is from Fox News. The Army fell about 15,000 soldiers, or 25% short of its recruitment goal this year, officials confirmed Friday, despite a frantic effort to make up the widely expected gap in a year when all the military services struggled in a tight jobs market to find young people who are fit to enlist. While the Army was the only service that didn't meet its target, all of the others had to dig deep into their pools of delayed entry applicants. Listen to that, which will put them behind as they begin the next recruiting year on Saturday. Worsening the problem, says Fox, is the debate whether America's fighting force should be restructured or reduced in size if the services can't recruit enough. What a nightmare. And could also put added pressure on the National Guard. My son-in-law is in the National Guard and Reserve to help, actually two son-in-laws, both of which were part of the National Guard. One of them who just, after many, many years, is now not with the National Guard right now, but to help meet its mission requirements. According to officials, the Marine Corps, listen to this, which usually goes into each fiscal year with as much as 50% of its recruiting goal already locked in, has only a little bit more than 30%, and the Air Force and Navy will only have about 10% of their goals. What's happening, guys? I really, truly believe that after 20 years of war and watching what happened and what's happened across the globe, especially with our troops, has affected how young people see the military. 20 years of war, and then Biden just turns over everything to the Taliban and exits. What was going on? Why did we do that? What were all these sacrifices about? I was actually on the phone with Sherdil, a very good friend of mine from Afghanistan. He was talking to my husband and I just the other day, Sherdil Qadari, very, very close friend. And we were talking about those final days in Afghanistan where, people were literally, including Sherdil, struggling just to survive, just to get onto a plane to get out. And all of the American lives that were lost. And what was it for? China now controls Bagram Airfield. We've got, soaring problems in the region with Pakistan, with, in South Asia, with a resurgence of terrorist organizations in the region. We didn't even save any part of that nation to be like a lily pad, which is what President Trump was talking about, to keep our eye on what was going on in Iran, what's going on in China. We just turned it all over and we armed the Taliban, literally billions of dollars in military equipment, as much as 80 billion in US military equipment. And we just abandoned it and came and left. Not only do we have that problem, but we also have a problem here in the United States. According to the Fox News story, 23% of young people can meet the military's fitness. This is only 23% right now in America, can meet the military's fitness, educational, and moral requirements. Think about that. With many of these young people being disqualified for reasons ranging from medical issues to criminal records and tattoos. We remain committed to maintaining our standards, investing in America's youth, and emphasizing quality over quantity. Let me tell you something. We have an issue when our young people can't even meet standards, weight standards, obesity in America, mental issues, educational issues. What is going on in this nation? We're supposed to be, number one, right? Where are our tax dollars going? Oh, wait, the trillions that were dumped into Afghanistan and they're just blown away? What about our children here? What about all the money going to Ukraine? And I'm not saying we shouldn't be defending and helping those that are fighting oppression. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we should, but I'm saying, you know what? We should come first. We should come first. Our children should come first. And what about the soaring rates of suicide among our veterans? I talk to my husband about this all the time. We're always stunned. And right now, there's a story, veteran suicide rate may be double federal estimates, and that's in the Military Times. I mean, this is a stunning statement of where our nation is today and why we need to start paying more attention to what is happening at home. Remember when I had David Limbaugh on and Kristen Limbaugh, and I bring people on every once in a while to talk about religion or to talk about Christ or to talk about spirituality. There is a lack of spirituality. There's a lack of God, of Christ, of whatever. There is a lack of that in our world today. And there's a sense of hopelessness. I couldn't believe this story. I mean, it scared me. We're looking at this. If the figures were right and repeated across other states, this is coming from America's Warrior Partnership in a joint study with the University of Alabama and Duke University, reviewed census data death from 2014 to 2018 for 8 states and found thousands of cases of suspected or confirmed suicides not included in the federal calculations that are normally released. Those figures would push the suicide rate of veterans during that time period, which is even higher now, from 17 individuals a day to 44 veterans a day. I'm telling you, we are in a world of hurt. Our nation is desperate right now to find, to find some kind of balance, to find hope, new leadership, taking care of our own children, taking care of our families. That's what's so important right now. And this is a reflection of who we are. And by the way, a national security issue as well. Military readiness. And what about the crazy woke ideology, while the DOD is focused on whether or not they're going to provide surgery for transgenders or transsexuals or, I don't know, LGBTQ, and whether or not they're going to, put inclusive language in military doctrine. We've got a suicide rate with our veterans that is out of control, and we have a shortage in our troops, from the Army through the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and the Navy. That is truly unacceptable. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the same kind of problem at the end of the show that is happening with our Border Patrol agents now. This is just terrifying. We're seeing the suicide rates escalate in our nation's Border Patrol. And there's no doubt, I've been talking to you about this now for years. They feel like their hands are tied behind their back, like their job is meaningless. They can't speak out because then they'll get kicked out of the workforce. Many of them have retired on the job. And no matter how hard some of our Border Patrol agents are working, they are running into walls left and right with their supervisors. And that is a big problem. I'll be right back with Virginia Krieger in a minute. As a mom, my heart just goes out to you and everyone out there that's listening to this right now. I have Virginia Krieger on with me. She lost her beautiful, beautiful daughter, Tiffany. And this opioid epidemic and crisis, and I call it, now I actually say it is an irregular warfare against our nation and our nation's children by our enemies in the United States. And I don't think there's anybody that can explain this crisis, this warfare better than the family member, better than a mother that lost her child to this. So thank you so much, Virginia, for joining me. And it's so good to see you again.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Virginia, let's talk about your daughter, Tiffany, and let's just talk about who she is. I mean, who she was. What kind of person was she? And, what are the things you remember about her most?
Well, Tiffany was an amazing daughter. I was so blessed to have had her for the short time that I did. She was a very talented vocalist and musician. She
American
was
Idol, right?
Yes, she made it to the semifinal rounds of American Idol twice. Just beautiful heart, just would help anybody who needed help. She was the kind of person, if she saw anybody being picked on or the underdog, she was always the one that stuck up for them. She was the mother of two young children, 3 and 5 years old when she passed. And her loss wasn't just a loss to our family, but it was a loss to so many others who she has helped along the way, people who just loved her. And it was a shock. It was nothing we expected. She wasn't what most people believe these victims to be. We're losing young people from all different walks of life, from all financial and racial backgrounds, many of whom do not have an existing addiction problem. In Tiff's case, she had fallen through a porch and injured her back. And she did everything she should do. She went to the doctor in the emergency room and she got the referral to the neurosurgeon. And while she was waiting for that appointment, someone offered her a Percocet. She knew what they were. She'd had them before. There was no reason to be alarmed by it. And, it was an act of compassion by someone who saw that she was in pain that claimed her life. And that pill was a fake pill. It contained illicit fentanyl and it killed her. And
she was only 26,
the same story,
right?
Only 26, yes. And this story's playing out over and over and over again across the country. These fake pills are everywhere. They look like Xanax and Adderall and Vicodin and Percocet. They're finding it in ecstasy and cocaine and party drugs that didn't used to kill people, but now they are. And it's most of the users, like Tiffany, were deceived. And so my daughter didn't overdose, and people use that word all the time. That is not what happened to her. The word overdose implies that she went out and sought fentanyl, got fentanyl, and simply took too much. That isn't what happened. Someone very deliberately disguised fentanyl as a far less lethal, far less dangerous, trademarked pharmaceutical product and gave it to her, and it killed her. And that's a poisoning. And so that message is resonating with so many families out there who are now part of our bereaved family discussion group, who also lost their children under similar circumstances. And it's not just in the pills. We have victims who went to a party on Friday night with their friends and did a little ecstasy or did a line of cocaine. Not that we condone that they did these things, but this is just almost a rite of passage now for our young people.
They don't expect them to die. They don't expect to die from this. It's not like they're shooting heroin up in their veins. It's not like they're addicts that we see, junkies on the corner. And your daughter was really at the beginning cusp of what, I mean, nobody knew, not me, not you, not any parents really understood what was happening with these counterfeit pills, because this was 2015, right? I think she passed away February of 2015.
2015. And the crazy part of it is that it had started, but we just didn't know it yet. When the heroin first hit the black market and people started dying, that was really the start of all of this. But what we didn't know and what we weren't looking for was that there was fentanyl being put into the heroin supply. So there are a lot of those deaths who were fentanyl related that we didn't even catch because we didn't know to even look for it. And so the majority of those users, they were not looking for fentanyl either. So, it impacted those in the substance use community first because, they did have more frequent drug use. And so the first line that they went through was through the heroin supply. And so then the question became, why would they be doing that? Why would cartels be putting fentanyl in heroin? It seems really counterintuitive, but it was actually very smart. What they were trying to do was to move their addicted populations over to this new product line. With fentanyl, they don't have to grow a poppy field. They don't have to maintain anybody to harvest it. They don't need to worry about weather conditions or any of the things they traditionally would have to worry about.
And the profit margin would be huge, right? I mean, the profit margin would be huge because they're bringing it across the border and they can hide it more readily.
Yes, they can hide it more readily. And the other thing about fentanyl is that it causes addiction much faster. They have to use it twice as much because it's very short acting. And so the users and the withdrawals are 1,000 times worse than they would go through from any other type of opiate. So they're doubling their business. People are going to have to use it more often, more frequently. They can incite addiction to fentanyl very rapidly. And so from a financial perspective, for the cartels, it's a win-win all the way around. But then they discovered something else.
What?
They discovered that America is a pill-popping nation. We are. Big pharma direct markets to our families every day, to our kids. Have a headache, take a pill. Feel sad, take a pill. It's a pill for everything. And so what they did is they started to make these pills to fill the gap left behind from that 15-year-old opioid crisis when we cracked down on prescription medications. And they filled that void with fentanyl. And so now what they're doing is they're trying to incite addiction to fentanyl in otherwise healthy people. And they're killing them.
This is what's really fascinating to me. And I had a light bulb moment while I'm listening to you because it's something that we've talked about before, Virginia, but it really hit me right now. Coroners during that time when we were seeing the increase in deaths and they were attributing it to heroin, to opioids, they weren't really looking for, these fentanyl tablets that, these pills, what happened with your daughter, for example, these counterfeit pills. So even the data that was attributed to overdoses was wrong. It had to have been because people were going into the coroner's, office. I mean, obviously when they try to see the cause of death, they would not have put down probably, a fentanyl tablet, Percocet counterfeit tablet. So it was almost as if it was happening like right under our noses, right in our communities, just like this evil permeating. And it wasn't just the cartels, but the fentanyl was actually coming from China. So it was our adversaries too.
Oh, absolutely. China is fully aware of what they're doing, and so the Trump administration did try to address the fentanyl coming out of China. There was an agreement signed in 2019, but 4 months after that agreement was signed, The largest shipment to date that has ever been seized was seized by the Mexican Navy in 2019. It was a shipment of 25.7 tons of illicit fentanyl that was going from China to the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. So they were shipping it directly to the cartel. Let me just, for your audience, elaborate. 25.7 tons of a product that kills in 2 milligrams. That was enough illicit fentanyl in that one shipment to take out the entire global population 1.5 times. So they never stopped.
To me, it's a weapon of mass destruction.
Correct.
It's a national security threat.
It is. And at any given time, right now in this country, we have unstable people driving around with the chemical capability in their hands to take out entire cities, and yet nobody seems to be alarmed, and they should be.
Why do you think that is, Virginia? Virginia, why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's twofold. Number one, we do have prescription pharmaceutical grade fentanyl that we use every day in this country. And that is a completely different ballgame. Prescription fentanyl is not what is on our streets. The molecular structure is different. The potency is different. The delivery systems are different. They are not the same thing. So I think in large part, the fact that we do have a clinical grade fentanyl that we use has kind of masked the fact that this illicit fentanyl is a whole different animal. It is far worse than anything that we could have ever imagined hitting the streets. And the public needs to be aware of this. And that's why we use that key distinction, illicit fentanyl. There is no clinical use for acetylfentanyl. There is no clinical use for carfentanil. There is no clinical use for parafluorofentanyl. But people don't understand that there are two different types that we're talking about.
And this is about our children, Virginia. You know, I got to tell you, because every time I speak to parents who've lost their children in such a tragic, horrific way, because it's like, I've lost people in my life too, not the same way, not a child, which I think is something completely different. But when you lose someone so dramatically, so instantaneously that you didn't even have a chance to say goodbye the right way, you know, it feels like you've been kicked in the gut, right? And I'm imagining all of these families and the large number of families. Let's talk about those numbers, because you and I were talking about it. Over 7,000 soldiers, troops. I like to say troops. Soldiers are just army, but troops lost in the war in Afghanistan in 20 years, tens of thousands wounded. That was just Afghanistan. I'm not including Iraq in those numbers. That's pretty significant. It affected my family. It's affected a lot of families. 2021, over 100,000 people dead in this country. And how many from fentanyl, illicit fentanyl? How many of that
72,108 that we know of? And here's the crazy part. Here's the crazy part. So for COVID, within 30 days, everybody in this country knew 3 things: wear a mask, social distance, wash your hands. Every day, we had a ticker on the TV all over, and they had how many cases there were, how many people died, how many people were in the hospital. We are 9 years into this fentanyl crisis, and we're only counting the dead. And we only get those numbers a year and a half after the fact. For a crisis is evolving by the day. How many people have fentanyl poisonings every day in this country who survive? Nobody knows. Yet we're trying to respond to a crisis when we don't even know how big it is. We don't know who it's affecting and how. And yet they keep trying to say they're addressing it, but they're not. You know, the true number is going to be found in how many survivors are there every day and how many people die. That's the number for how big it is, how it's hitting them. And nobody has stopped to ask our families, how did fentanyl get to your child? Did your child have substance use disorder? Was it in a pill? Was it in cocaine? Was it in ecstasy? These are all questions we should have answers to that we don't. The worst part is there hasn't been, that I know of, a single scientific study that measures the impacts, the real impacts of what illicit fentanyl can do. Everything that's being put out right now by professionals, it's all conjecture, and it's all based on pharmaceutical grade fentanyl. We've already established that this is molecularly different than pharmaceutical grade fentanyl. So why haven't we done a study? So we know all the details about acetylfentanyl and carfentanil and parafluorofentanyl. Why hasn't that been done yet 9 years in?
Right. 9 years in with these soaring death rates that may be so underreported. I mean, even if you look at the 72,000 of illicit fentanyl, not even looking at the over 100,000 opioid deaths, I'm sure it's much, much higher than that. The frustration I imagine for you, Virginia, is that you are shouting at the rooftops. You're going with families. You've started a group, a phenomenal organization for families to really warn and save other lives. You're saving lives every single day. Your daughter's life was not in vain. I feel like I'm going to cry right now because I know her and I know how amazing she is and I know how hard this must be for you and for everyone else. But you are literally saving lives every day, doing what you could not do for your own daughter, what your daughter couldn't do for herself because she had no idea.
And that's just it. You know, it's not just about Tiff. It's about, 15-year-old Olivia Green. It's about, Austin Babcock. It's about all of these beautiful young people who should be here. They should be here. Isaiah Gonzalez. He was a football player. He was just starting. He was only 16 years old. He should be here. And these families, a lot of people try to say, well, they shouldn't have done drugs. Let's be realistic. We live in a society today where drug use among our young people is almost as much a rite of passage as having a drink every now and then, because that's what they do. We're not here to pass judgment. We're here to keep them alive. And today, any drug use, experimental, first time, or whether they have the worst case of substance use disorder imaginable, they all have the same odds of death. The only difference is how often they play the game. And it is Russian roulette. You just don't know. Those acts of compassion where we could share prescription medication in the past, those days are gone. If you don't know if it did not come in a bottle with your name on it, you cannot trust that what this person that you think is your friend or this person you think you don't know where they got it from. So you can't trust it anymore. We've been very blessed that we've never had this problem, but we have it now. And if people would just stop for a minute and recognize what we're losing, you said 7,000 to the Afghanistan conflict. Do you know Vietnam was a 20-year war? We lost 50,220 lives during that 20-year war. We buried 72,000 last year alone to illicit fentanyl. And in large part, it's because we have a lopsided approach. We're not addressing the poisoning aspect at all. And the media loves to dance around the word. They'll say, and they may not know they're consuming it. Well, if they don't know they're consuming it, then they were poisoned. So let's just call it what it is. And the solutions that one would use for a poisoning are wildly different than the ones one would use to solve an addiction problem. Now, I'm not saying that we don't need addiction resolutions. We absolutely do. That is a big problem. We're still coming out in the wake of the 15-year-old opioid crisis, and this is overlapping with it. So what we need is a balanced approach, a whole of society approach that will, first of all, make sure that all these parents can tell their children about it. Right now, how can they warn their kids about these harmful drugs if the parents don't even know? And so they don't.
And I can tell you this, Virginia, I've talked to parents who are like, what? What are you talking about? There's counterfeit pills. I mean, people are hearing more about it now because of groups like yours, but you brought up something very important. You talked about, the distinguishing it from poisoning from actual addiction. We have to have two different approaches here. In Chicago in 1982, Tylenol poisoning. Remember that? Yep. It was all over the news. People were throwing away their Tylenol bottles. Nobody wanted to buy Tylenol. It was crazy. Everybody just went bananas because it was so scary, right? We could be at the store. We could be buying Tylenol for a headache, and then we could be dying. And I think there were 7 murders. I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that. I could be wrong, but I think there were about 7 murders. Here we have, over 72,000 people, young people and families and torn apart and children torn apart. Your grandchildren won't be able to have their mother with them, and families are devastated. And by the way, what about all the people that are being Narcaned or that survive a poisoning of fentanyl and have brain damage from that? And all of that, they're the victims too. They're
and we're not
victims
testing
too.
for that, by the way. There's no protocols in place for follow-up care. They're not checking these folks to see if they have any brain damage after an adverse event. They're just treating them and streeting them. You know, as soon as they're done with their naloxone and they're stable enough, they put them right back out on the street. So we have people who are walking around right now who may have, deficits in their brain function, and we don't even know it. No agency is tracking that. No agency has even looked at it. The protocols, the risk assessments for people who have substance abuse issues, most of those haven't been updated to put, recreational drug use into high risk categories that wouldn't have been 5 years ago or even 6 years ago. But now they are. A cocaine user would have been considered kind of a low risk category for death. That's not true anymore. So there are so many things that we're running to try to get people caught up with. And it is new and it is different. But the very first thing we need to do is first we have to properly categorize what's happening so we can assess how many are we losing to these fake pills? How many had substance use disorder? How many didn't? How can we get to these populations to warn them? And of course, interdiction. That's the number one thing you can do when you're dealing with a poison. So weapon of mass destruction is one of the things we're pushing for. And that doesn't mean that we won't have prescription fentanyl to use anymore. That's not true. Botox is a weapon of mass destruction, but we use it in this country every day. But if we can get illicit fentanyl on that list, what that'll do is free up all those federal resources so we can start to go after the manufacturers right at the head of the snake. So, we have multiple initiatives going. Our group, Lost Voices of Fentanyl, is probably the only group on earth that cries when we grow. We've been averaging 300 newly bereaved families a week for over a year now. And now we're up to 20.7 thousand bereaved family members in our group, and it's growing every day. We just had a big march in Washington, D.C. to demand action on this crisis. Our families are hurting. There are no resources in place to deal with the families left behind. In Ohio alone in 2019, more than 15,000 children entered foster care due to the death of one or both parents or severe neglect associated with this crisis. And then the next thing coming up the pike, which I tell people about, I'm in my 50s now. My daughter would have been my caretaker in my old age. Who is going to take care of this population who don't have their children to be their caretakers when we get old? Is the federal government going to do it? Are nursing homes our only hope? The ripple effect from this is going to last for the next 2 to 3 generations, and that's if we solve it today. So, we can't stress hard enough how we really need to get everybody on board, and we need to start managing this properly.
What's coming out of Washington on this? Because here's where I'm at. Our government is so focused on so many things that have nothing to do with our internal national security and the health of our nation. And I feel as though our adversaries, like China, we just talked about that earlier, others are taking advantage of that. They're targeting our people. They're targeting our country. I would say using the drug cartels as a proxy to ensure this destruction of our youth. And what is Washington telling you? You were in Washington. You were standing there with Derek Maltz and everyone else. Is anyone from the government, from the Biden administration saying, hey, Virginia, I'm reaching out to you. Tell me about what happened. Let's figure this out together.
When President Trump got elected, we did the same thing with Biden. We had written letters to the former president with photos of our lost children asking for help with the crisis. And we did get personalized responses back. And I had the same hope when President Biden came into office that, especially having a son who has problems, that he would be sympathetic to our cause. And so we wrote the same exact letters to his office with photos of our children. And we got COVID. Well, they were both COVID form letters and the Build Back Better form letters from them, which was really a a gut punch to all of us because we did have hope. They have not reached out to us. They have not sat down and taken the time to even ask us how fentanyl got to our children or how they could help. So our families, we've given up hope on that front. The DEA has been amazing. They have started their One Pill Can Kill campaign. They're trying to get the public warnings out there. And we're doing it ourselves. Our movement is a truly grassroots movement. This is being funded by families who are hurting, not because we can help our children, not because there's anything that can be done for us at this point. Our children are gone. We're doing it to save everyone else's. So we're putting out PSAs. We're putting up billboards. We're paying for it ourselves because we care that much and it matters to us that much. And we would love to get support from these folks, but we just aren't getting it right now. And, we have tried to get meetings with the ONDCP. We have reached out to this administration on several levels, and to date, we have not had any response.
Well, I know that I want to be able to help. I know there are families out there, and I think everyone who's listening to Virginia right now, everyone who has a child in their life or a family member, because we all go through our own struggles, but especially those of you out there with children, this is about saving your child's life, your grandchild's life, your sister, your brother, your mother, your father. This is about all of us because it's not just about Virginia, right? Tiffany is a perfect example of what happens when we don't hear a message, when a message is hidden from us. And she's also a perfect example of how we can do everything right now to start saving people's lives. How can we help, Virginia? Where can we donate to? What can we do to start getting the message out, helping you all out with billboards? I mean, let's do it. We're in charge here, guys. It's all of us, every single one of us. When we take a look at our kids tomorrow, and when my daughter gets home from school, I want to be able to know that I heard a message and I moved that forward. I'm able to help her and help other children so that there's not another Virginia Krieger out there crying for her child, right? And that I could do what I can to save mine too. So what can we do?
Well, first of all, so our organization is founded by April Babcock, by the way, and I have to give April, my partner, credit for that because she's just an amazing voice for everyone. Lost Voices of Fentanyl is the name of our organization. We have a growing Facebook discussion group. You can find us there. We also have a website. It's our initials, lvof.org. We are a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit. You can make donations there. We are always looking for help. Anyone who has, help that can get us billboards up, flyers. We're trying to get into schools. We're doing posters. We're sitting down and we're trying to re-educate our law enforcement agencies to understand how this fentanyl is getting to our children so that we're not treating this like the old crisis, because this is not the old drug crisis. This is a new crisis. And the biggest thing you can do to help is not use that O word. When you say overdose, what you're telling me as a mother is that my daughter went out and sought fentanyl, got fentanyl, and accidentally took too much. And that is not what happened to her. She was poisoned. And the majority of these victims, whether they have substance use disorder or not, are not aware that fentanyl is in what they are about to consume. And they're all being poisoned and deceived. And we need to change the national discussion. And we need to start addressing this. And if we do that, if we start to treat these cases as poisonings, not only will we be able to properly warn the public, but it's also going to devote a portion of our efforts to that cause, which will help everyone. The solutions for poisoning will help everyone. Contact your congressman, talk to your representatives, demand that they take this crisis seriously and start to do something meaningful to address it.
Every single one of us, we've got to do that. Our children are being murdered. Let's just say what it is. Our children are being murdered, and we can't walk around with our heads in the sand. We can't stick our heads in the sand. We can't walk around like it's not happening. Each and every one of us is responsible for speaking out now. Everyone who's heard this, If you just tell 10 more people to listen to Virginia, or you tell them Virginia's story and you get online and go to her Facebook page, go to the website, we can work together to solve this crisis. I'm going to do everything I can, Virginia, to get the word out. 100%. We are going to do this together. You are not alone. I think that we all have to realize, look, guys, this isn't about the O word, the overdose word. This is about all of us working together to save lives and to save our children from being murdered by these adversaries of ours that are targeting our nation. And I believe that. I believe we can make a difference, Virginia.
And the biggest
is there anything that I left out? I mean, is there anything that I left out here?
The biggest thing too is that this is not and cannot be a red or blue issue. It's not.
Right.
This, right. I had to make a poster because the division right now is so bad out there. And here's the thing, and I wrote fentanyl is an equal opportunity killer. It does not care if you are GOP or DNC. We are a family, an American family. And when someone comes into our house and they start killing our children, that's the time that we put aside all those differences and we work together so that we can keep our children safe. And that's our very first priority as a nation. And I think if we can all view this for what it is and start working together, we can make a change, but it's got to come from us first. So, and I thank you, Sarah,
from your mouth to God's ears. Oh, from your mouth to God's ears, Virginia, you're amazing. Like I said, this is a war, guys. We're going to win little battles. We got to get out there. We got to save our children. We have to save our families. This is as if a predator is hanging outside your home or outside your child's school or outside your friend's house, and they're getting ready to target your family, target your friend, target your child, and take them away from you. You have to feel that strongly about it. You have to be willing to be offensive on this, not defensive. That may be too late. That was the warning from Virginia Krieger. She wants you to hear that. She wants you to understand what happened to her so that you don't face that same kind of heartache. Before I let you all go, I said I would touch on this story, which I think is a brilliant story. It's in the Washington Examiner. It's by Anna and I hope I pronounce her name correctly, Giaritelli. She's the Homeland Security reporter, does some great work there. CBP calls in suicidologist as workforce deaths rise. Wow. So basically, the largest law enforcement agency in America, she says, has a suicide problem. Yes, it does. It has a huge problem because this agency has been played with by our politicians like it's a joke. I'm on the front lines with the Border Patrol agents, and many of them say to me, hey, what am I doing here? Am I just theater? Agents have died from COVID out on the border, trying to apprehend people illegally crossing our border. Many of them criminals. Yes, there are many criminals. There are many bad guys. They're in foot chases, car chases, and of course, they've got the families and the people that are walking across and turning themselves in. And even during COVID, there's so many agents. Throw aside their own health, their own, life to save people that are crossing that border in the most intense heat, dehydrated, sick with, they don't even know what. I've had agents that I've known have caught COVID. They've caught pneumonia. They've had other viruses. They don't even know what they don't even know what it is, but they're there. They are helping. They're providing first aid for people coming across that border. And then they are treated like dirt by many of our lawmakers. And in fact, I would say their own Department of Homeland Security, which is completely not making our nation secure, headed by Alejandro Mayorkas, has failed them as well. And now we see that there's a problem with suicide. Listen to this. Over the past 15 years, U.S. Customs and Border Protection has lost 146 employees to suicide. Senior officials became especially concerned this year because deaths spiked early on. We were sitting at 5 suicides, and that was alarming, said acting COO Benjamin Carey Huffman. in an exclusive interview with the Washington Examiner. In the midst of the humanitarian and national security crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border, CBP leadership needed to reform its approach to the well-being of its 60,000-strong workforce. The federal agency became the first government entity to add a suicidologist to its ranks in the first half of 2021, because we know that when suicides increase, a lot of times, I mean, it's like an avalanche effect, right? One person commits suicide, another person commits suicide. And imagine what that does for the family too, right? So it's not just about the men and women of the Border Patrol. It's not just about the men and women in the military. It's about the families as well. And what happens to those families. It's an entire breakdown in our society and in our nation. And it's something we need to pay attention to. We can't afford not to. It's a great story. It's an important story. I'm glad it was written. I used to work at the Washington Examiner. It's a great place. You guys, if you want, look up that story. CBP calls in suicidologists as workforce deaths rise. Thank you so much for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. Thank you for listening to Virginia Krieger. She's amazing. She will be my friend for life because she is doing the right thing. She took her tragedy and is trying to make something out of that so that her daughter's life would not be lost in vain, so that we can save our children and our friends and family from the same fate. Remember, folks, it's a scary world out there, but only if we let it be. We can take the power back. We can fight back together. Thanks again for listening to the Sara Carter Show. Remember, you can follow me at Sara Carter DC on Twitter, S Carter DC on Instagram. Go to saraacarter.com, or you can follow me on Rumble. Rumble is great. The Sara Carter Show. Go to Rumble. You'll hear all of my podcasts there, and it'll be full. You won't have to worry. And YouTube as well. For those of you who are still, stuck on YouTube, please go to YouTube as well. Thank you. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless Virginia Krieger. And God bless the great state of Texas.